It began with whispers, the kind that slither through the ancient corridors of royal residences like drafts under a door. Whispers about Queen Camilla. Whispers that soon coalesced into a roar that shook the very foundations of the House of Windsor. The palace, that stoic fortress of tradition, finally cracked, releasing a statement so stark, so devoid of explanation, it sent the world reeling. The Queen will no longer retain authority over legacy. 9 words. 9 chilling words that spoke volumes about a power struggle fought in the shadow, a battle for the very soul of the monarchy. Let's be clear, the British monarchy is more than just a collection of castles and crowns. It's a carefully constructed narrative, a story woven from centuries of history, tradition, and, perhaps most importantly, symbolism. And at the heart of that symbolism lies the legacy, the jewels, the archives, the ceremonial protocols, the tangible links to the past that give the monarchy its weight and its meaning. To strip a queen consort of all authority over that legacy is an act of unprecedented severity, a public rebuke that suggests a profound breach of trust. But what could possibly have led to such a drastic measure? To understand that, we have to rewind the clock to the weeks leading up to that fateful December announcement. King Charles, still navigating the choppy waters of his reign, was already weak, his health a constant source of concern. His reduced schedule created a void, a vacuum of power that Camilla initially seemed to fill with the best of intentions. She attended briefings, reviewed ceremonial outlines, approved appearances, all tasks that Charles had previously handled personally. And given her decades of service and her unwavering support of the king, few questioned her expanding role. At first, but as November deepened, subtle shifts began to occur. Red flags that, in hindsight, seem glaringly obvious. A jeweler attached to the royal collection, a man who had spent his life handling priceless artifacts with the utmost care, noticed unusual requests for access to pieces historically linked to Princess Diana. Diana's jewels. The very words conjure a potent mix of glamour, tragedy, and enduring public fascination. These weren't just baubles, they were symbols loaded with emotional weight, and they were being requested through channels that bypassed the usual rigorous oversight. Around the same time, an archivist, a woman who had dedicated her career to safeguarding the late Queen Elizabeth's personal papers, observed similar irregularities. Requests for documents, particularly those related to the provenance of major legacy items, were coming in at odd hours. The signatures hurried, the purpose unclear. It was as if someone was searching for something specific, and they were in a hurry to find it. These incidents, on their own, might have been dismissed as administrative quirks, but they were not isolated. They were threads in a tapestry that was slowly being woven in the shadows. And the pattern it revealed was deeply unsettling. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, a woman known for her unwavering devotion to duty and her fierce protection of royal tradition, was the first to sound the alarm. During a routine meeting to review winter engagements, she spotted a draft positioning Camilla at the symbolic center of an event meant to honor Queen Elizabeth. The protocol was so out of character, so jarringly inappropriate, that Anne stopped mid-sentence. "This is not how we preserve her legacy," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The gauntlet had been thrown. The battle for the soul of the monarchy had begun. William, too, was receiving unsettling reports. Whispers from various departments, quiet concerns about influence being consolidated in ways that felt, well, intentional. He'd seen this before, this subtle creep of personal narratives overshadowing institutional ones. He recognized the early tremors of something that could destabilize far more than just public perception. This wasn't about vanity, this was about power. The power to shape the narrative, to control the image, to redefine the very essence of the monarchy. By the end of November, the palace wasn't dealing with isolated incidents anymore. It was facing a pattern, a constellation of anomalies, and every line in that constellation pointed back to one place: Camilla. The quiet rooms of Windsor, usually sanctuaries of history and tradition, became war rooms. A heritage audit, ostensibly meant to prepare for the holiday season, unearthed discrepancies that sent a chill through the department. Entries that didn't match protocol, rushed signatures, approvals routed through Camilla's office instead of the proper channel. Small details perhaps, but together they painted a disturbing picture. The archivist responsible for Elizabeth's personal documents, a woman who had served the late queen with unwavering loyalty for nearly 2 decades, described it as a shift in the shadows. Subtle but deeply, deeply wrong. She saw unusual access requests appearing in the system, files tied to the provenance of major legacy items. It wasn't about historical research, it was about something else, something more strategic. Princess Anne encountered her own red flag during a rehearsal for an early December tribute event. The moment she unfolded the preliminary draft of the procession lineup, her expression froze. Camilla was positioned at the visual center of a display meant to honor the late queen, a place never before assigned to a consort. It wasn't a clerical error. The language was too deliberate, the symbolism too pointed. When Anne asked who had adjusted the draft, no one could give her a straight answer. Silence, that most damning of admission, hung heavy in the air. Reports began to filter through William's more informal channels. A communications advisor mentioned that Camilla's recent appearances, paired with specific jewelry pieces, were creating confusion among older viewers, those who still associated those items with Diana. A royal jeweler added that certain pieces had been requested repeatedly for review, an unusual pattern given their historical sensitivity. And then there were the private meetings, the ones held at Ray Mill House, Camilla's country retreat, attended by figures outside the established ceremonial structure. People Anne didn't recognize, people William didn't trust. One late evening, William stood alone in his study, reviewing a compiled list of these incidents. Each note, each discrepancy, each whisper formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't administrative drift. It was movement, deliberate, strategic, and aimed at the heart of royal symbolism. Even Catherine, usually so careful, so diplomatic, sensed the change. During a quiet dinner, she mentioned that the public tone around Camilla felt different, as if the narrative was shifting subtly but steadily toward placing the queen at the center of the monarchy's emotional story. William didn't answer right away. He simply folded the report in his hand and set it down. The weight of it was palpable. By the time December arrived, the signs were no longer isolated anomalies. They were threads weaving a much darker tapestry. Something, or someone, was manipulating the language of legacy, and every new discovery pointed back to Camilla's expanding sphere of influence. The Heritage Risk Brief, a document that would ultimately seal Camilla's fate, landed on William's desk late one evening. Compiled by senior jewelers, archivists, and ceremonial officers, it laid bare a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as mere coincidence. Queen Camilla's influence over royal legacy was becoming not only irregular but dangerous. The brief began with the jewelry logs. Repeated access requests routed through Camilla's private secretary instead of standard channel. The items in question? Pieces intimately tied to Diana. A sapphire brooch, photographed on her during a major diplomatic event. Earrings known to be part of her personal collection. An emerald set, its provenance already a matter of public debate. The jewelers, hoping for a correction from above, had maintained their silence for weeks. None came. Then, the archival inconsistency. Elizabeth's personal documents detailing her private intentions regarding certain jewels, accessed not once, but twice in a single month. The archivist, noting the timestamps with growing unease, described the requests as targeted, precise, almost as if someone were searching for leverage rather than historical understanding. Intent unclear, but urgency unmistakable, his final note stated. Chilling. Parallel to this, the ceremonial division reported its own concern. The draft positioning Camilla at the symbolic center of the tribute to Elizabeth was not an isolated misstep. 3 additional documents revealed similar attempts to subtly shift ceremonial emphasis toward her. An event planner described it as an orbit being redrawn, slowly but unmistakably. But the most alarming portion of the brief? Intelligence tied to Ray Mill House. Reports indicated Camilla had been hosting a series of private meetings there, attended by a mix of trusted confidantes and individuals with no established ties to the working royal structure. The content of those meetings remained unclear, but the overlap between those attendees and the sudden spikes in heritage activity raised serious questions. Discussions centered on redefining the queen's symbolic place in the modern monarchy, one advisor hinted. Another suggested a coordinated plan was forming around how and when specific jewelry pieces would be worn or withheld, all to shift public sentiment. Princess Anne, reviewing the brief in silence, was deeply disappointed. This was an internal risk, a distortion of the very heritage she had dedicated her life to preserving. If symbols are manipulated, she told William, her voice unwavering, the institution becomes fragile, and fragility is a luxury we do not have. Charles, presented with a condensed version, read slowly, each detail a heavy weight. His illness had forced him to depend heavily on Camilla. This document felt like a betrayal. Like learning the person holding him up was also rearranging the ground beneath his feet. Across the Atlantic, American media, particularly shows favored by viewers over 50, began questioning Camilla's increasingly bold jewelry choices. She's recasting history piece by piece, one commentator remarked. A subtle power play wrapped in diamonds, said another. Guesses, perhaps, but they align too closely with the palace's private knowledge. Inside Windsor, William convened a small group. Anne, the director of ceremonial, and the senior jeweler. Piece by piece, they mapped the timeline connecting each irregularity. When the final line was drawn, all paths pointed toward the same truth. Camilla was not merely overstepping. She was reshaping, shaping legacy, shaping symbolism, shaping the monarchy's emotional narrative, one jewel, one draft, one quiet meeting at a time. And by early December, the palace understood with absolute clarity. If they did not act now, the damage would spread far beyond the walls of Windsor.